Okay, picture this. You're on a classic Indian highway, sun beating down, and for years, decades even, the main sound was that deep rumble. Diesel trucks.
The backbone of commercial transport, absolutely.
Exactly, carrying everything everywhere. Diesel was just the fuel. But then something really kind of unexpected happened in 2023 into 2024.
Ah.
Like the whole fuel scene just shifted gears dramatically. Diesel, the big heavyweight, its growth slowed right down to just what, 2%?
Barely moving, yeah.
Meanwhile, petrol is still chugging along and electric vehicles, well, they've suddenly burst onto the scene with all this energy. It's a fascinating shift, almost a fuel shakeup.
It really is.
And that's what we want to unpack today for you. We've been looking at some interesting figures, especially from the Petroleum Planning and Analysis Cell PPAC, and some forward-looking stuff from the India Brand Equity Foundation, IBEF.
Good data there.
Yeah. So our mission really is to understand this changing story. You know, how India is being fueled, what's behind these surprising changes, and maybe what it signals for how we'll all be getting around in the future.
And that diesel slowdown is, well, it's the first big piece of the puzzle, isn't it? That 2% figure for the last fiscal year,
Yeah.
it really makes you pause.
Especially when you think about how dominant it was.
Right. We're talking about the fuel that powers something like 3/4 of India's entire commercial fleet. Trucks, buses, those tempos you see everywhere.
Uh-huh.
So traditionally, if diesel demand dipped, you'd immediately think, okay, commercial activity is cooling off, less stuff being moved around.
That was always the connection, wasn't it? Slow diesel sales meant a slower economy, more or less.
Pretty much, yeah.
But are you suggesting that maybe that link isn't quite as strong anymore, that there's something else going on?
I think that's exactly what the data is pointing towards.
Mm.
Yes, broader economic factors probably play some role. You can't ignore that. But there's strong evidence that this is also about a transition starting.
A transition towards electric.
Precisely. The rise of electric commercial vehicles, ECVs, seems to be genuinely starting to, well, to eat into diesel's share. These aren't just future concepts. They're on the road, doing work.
It's quite something to imagine those noisy diesel engines gradually being replaced by, well, a quiet hum. But maybe put that 2% into context for us, because fuel demand went kind of haywire during the pandemic, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Context is key here. During the lockdowns, diesel use just plummeted. Everything stopped.
Ghost roads.
But then, as things reopened in 2021-22, we saw a huge rebound. Diesel demand jumped, I think it was about 12%.
Wow, okay.
And even the year after, 2022-23, it was still strong growth, around 4.8% as the economy recovered.
Oh.
So that's why this recent 2% feels so different. It's not just things settling down after the rebound. It feels like a more fundamental shift kicked in during 2023-24.
Okay, so diesel's sort of losing steam. And stepping into that gap, you have electric vehicles gaining speed. The IBEF forecast you mentioned, 16.7% growth for electric commercial vehicles this year. That sounds like a lot.
It is a significant percentage jump. They're projecting it could reach around 10,000 ECV units sold in FY 2024-25.
10,000. What does that actually look like? What kind of electric trucks and buses are we seeing?
Well, looking at the sales from the first 9 months of 2024 gives a good idea. The real stars are the electric light goods vehicles, the e-LGVs.
Like smaller delivery vans?
Exactly. Those vans zipping around cities doing last-mile deliveries. They accounted for nearly 60% of all ECV sales, almost 4,700 units. And get this, that's a 233% increase year on year.
233%. That's massive growth.
It really is. They just make sense for those urban delivery routes. But electric buses are also picking up significantly. Over 3,000 sold in that same period, which is up 108%.
Okay, still huge growth.
Yeah, and the forecasts for e-buses are really ambitious. They're talking about maybe hitting over 17,000 units by FY 2026-27. That's like more than 3 times the number from FY 24.
So a big push for cleaner public transport in cities.
Definitely seems like it.
Okay, those numbers are compelling, but why now? What's making electric suddenly so much more viable, especially for commercial use? It can't just be good intentions, right? Businesses need a bottom line.
Absolutely not. It boils down to, I think, 3 main interconnected drivers. First, and maybe most importantly, costs are coming down.
The purchase price, or running costs.
Both, actually. Lithium-ion battery packs, the most expensive part of an EV, have seen prices fall quite steadily, down to around $139 per kilowatt hour in 2023, from over $160 the year before.
Okay, so the stickle shock is lessening a bit.
Exactly. But maybe even more critical for businesses is the lower operating cost. Electricity is just, well, generally a lot cheaper per kilometer than diesel. Over the life of a truck or a bus, that adds up to massive savings.
Right. Fuel is a huge expense for transport companies. Lower running costs speak volumes.
For sure.
But the classic EV worry, where do I charge it? Has the infrastructure actually caught up enough to support this kind of commercial growth? Range anxiety is real.
That's the second key factor.
Yeah.
The charging infrastructure is improving, and quite rapidly in some areas. As of early 2024, India had over 12,000 public charging stations.
12,000 scattered across the country.
Well, concentrated more in certain states like Maharashtra and Delhi, which are leading the way. But the network is expanding. The government's putting serious money into it with schemes like PM eDrive,
Okay.
and you're seeing private companies jumping into Adani Total Energies, JSW MG Motor, Tata, Hara Petroleum. They're all setting up charging points.
So it's getting easier, at least in the cities and along major routes.
Yeah, it's becoming much less of a barrier than it was even a couple of years ago. Rural charging is still a challenge, definitely, but the urban picture is changing fast.
Okay, so cost down, charging up. What's the third piece? You mentioned government support earlier.
That's the third crucial element. Strong government policy and incentives. The FABE scheme, faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles, was huge.
Right, I remember that. Lots of subsidies.
Exactly. It subsidized over 1.3 million EVs by the start of 2024. Even though Phase 2 ended, there's a new scheme, EMPS 2024, focused on keeping the momentum going for electric 2- and 3-wheelers.
Ah,
And then there's the big picture goal. The government wants a really significant chunk of new vehicles to be electric by 2030. We're talking 70% of commercial vehicles, 40% of buses, 80% of 2- and 3-wheelers.
80%. That's aiming high. Millions of EVs.
Very ambitious, yes. It signals a clear direction.
So it's this combination of better economics, more places to charge, and a policy push. Makes sense. But okay, while EVs are charging ahead, what about petrol? Diesel's slowing, but petrol's still popular, right?
That's right. Petrol consumption is still growing. The main reason is simply the passenger car market. More people buying personal vehicles, especially as cities grow.
So individual car ownership is keeping petrol demand up.
Pretty much. And we're also seeing a shift within the car market. Fewer people are buying diesel cars for personal use now. They're opting for petrol or, increasingly, hybrids.
Ah, hybrids is a kind of compromise.
Sort of a bridging technology
Yeah.
for some, yeah. There was that small fuel price cut recently, remember? About 2 rupees per liter.
Yeah, in March.
But that probably didn't change the underlying trend much. It's really about personal mobility choices driving petrol demand for now.
Interesting dynamic. Diesel squeezed by commercial EVs, petrol propped up by personal cars. Okay, so who are the companies actually building all these EVs that are making waves?
On the bus side, you've got major players like Tata Motors, Electra, and JBM Auto really pushing things forward. Their e-buses are becoming common sights in cities like Delhi and Mumbai.
Making public transport quieter, definitely.
Yeah. And for those electric light goods vehicles, the delivery vans, Mahindra and Mahindra with their Trio, and Tata Motors again with the AZV, are really strong contenders. They're hitting that sweet spot for last-mile logistics.
Okay, but weren't 2- and 3-wheelers the biggest chunk of EV sales overall?
By far. They absolutely dominate the numbers. We're talking something like 94% of all EV sales in 2023-24 were 2- or 3-wheelers.
94%.
Yep. Over 940,000 electric 2-wheelers and more than 630,000 electric 3-wheelers sold.
Wow. Who are the big names there?
For 2-wheelers, you've got companies like Ola Electric, Bajaj, Author Energy leading the pack. And in the electric 3-wheeler space, Mahindra and Piaggio are major players. Those electric autos are everywhere now.
It really feels like a whole new automotive ecosystem is being built.
Right.
So let's zoom out. What's the bigger picture? Why does this shift, from diesel towards electric actually matter for India and for someone listening to this?
Well, the implications are potentially huge on
Fair.
multiple fronts. Economically, think about imports. India imports, 80% of its crude oil?
A massive amount, big drain on foreign exchange.
Exactly.
Well-
Shifting transport to domestically generated electricity could significantly reduce that dependency over time. That's a big economic win.
Okay, that's huge. What else?
Environmentally, it's crucial. Road transport accounts for a significant chunk of India's CO2 emissions, maybe around 12%. Cutting that is vital for meeting climate goals, like the net zero target for 2070.
Cleaner air in cities, too, presumably.
Absolutely. Less noise pollution as well.
Yeah.
But we also have to be realistic about the hurdles.
Right. It's not all smooth sailing. What are the main challenges?
Well, the upfront cost of EVs, while falling, is still higher than conventional vehicles. That's a barrier for many buyers.
Uh-huh.
Expanding the charging infrastructure, especially into smaller towns and rural areas, needs a lot more work and investment.
Yeah, can't just be a big city thing.
No. Then there are potential supply chain issues, particularly around battery, sourcing the materials, manufacturing capacity. And critically, we need good systems for recycling all those batteries at the end of their life. We don't want to solve one environmental problem just to create another one.
Good point. Battery recycling is key. And I suppose diesel isn't disappearing overnight either.
Not at all. It will still play a vital role for years, especially in heavy-duty trucking, long-haul freight, and in rural areas where charging is less accessible. This transition will take time.
Right, it's a gradual shift, not a sudden switch off. Okay, so if we were to boil it all down, what are the main takeaways for someone trying to grasp this?
I'd say three key things. One, diesel's strong growth era seems to be over, largely thanks to the rise of electric commercial vehicles. Two, petrol is still relevant, mainly because people are still buying personal cars. And three, electric vehicles are experiencing really rapid growth across the board, driven by those falling costs, better infrastructure, and government support.
That sums it up nicely. Okay, so here's something to maybe chew on after listening. What are the really long-term ripple effects of this massive energy transition on India's whole economy, its environment, even the way our cities are designed and function? What new industries might pop up? What jobs might change or be created? And crucially, what are the big challenges we absolutely need to get ahead of to make sure this shift is, sustainable and works for everyone?
That's the multi-trillion rupee question, isn't it? It definitely prompts further thought. And for anyone wanting to keep tabs on this, watching the reports from PPAC and IBEF and tracking government policy updates is probably the best way.
Absolutely. It's clear the way India moves is undergoing a profound transformation, this whole evolving fuel landscape. It's a really crucial and honestly a fascinating story to keep watching.